You know, it's been great to be here, guys, with you tonight. I'm so excited that you came out to this Creative Mornings event. Just seeing the amount of people involved with this organization blows my mind and gives me faith in humanity that people within these various professional fields can get together and work on an idea or a project that could bring so much enlightenment, so much fun, some ideas to us outside of our professional lives. So I want to thank you guys for doing this stuff, and I've already learned so much about technology in 5 minutes that it will aid me on future endeavors. So thank you, Edwin, and all you cats. You know, I just want to know, and the people in the room today, how many of you guys are actually designers? Anyone raise your hand? So if you guys are designers, who's involved in the industry, creative industries? And what about hospitality industry? Okay, cool. So mostly me and my staff are involved in the hospitality industry. Well, you know, I basically came up with this idea of presenting the tale of a successful failure because when I was confronted with the fact that I was one, it excited me to no end. I was in Mexico City in 2001 at a weird festival that we were invited in, and there's a gentleman named Guillermo Santamarina who we were corresponding with kind of briefly with his assistants about doing this freaked out performance event in a 16th century church right outside the Zocalo. And we were freaking out about who is this Guillermo guy? And we saw pictures of him and he was pretty cool looking. When we got to Mexico City and walked into his museum for performance art, can you imagine what that is conceptually, a museum for performance art? In the 16th century church, I walked up to him and he's like, Edward Marszewski? I'm like, yes, Guillermo. Guillermo, I'm a successful failure. And he shook my hand and I'm like, I'm a successful failure too, Guillermo. You are my new sensei. And that's how this title came to be. Guillermo was a very important man in my life. That's my name. And that's me. I think this is the early 90s. I was at the University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana. That's right. Who's U of I? Who's orange and blue? All right, free beers for ILL people, guys. Hook it up. Basically, I entered as an art student, and I dropped out of art school after the first year because I thought it was bullshit. Then I had to maintain some sort of interest in the school to stay in school, so I took history and some liberal arts classes, and I decided to become a political science major. That decision has ruined my life. I basically started going to classes and learning about alternative versions of history. I started reading communist literature like Mother Jones and The Nation magazine. I started getting turned into a progressive activist because you may know that George Bush Jr. or George Bush Sr. just passed away. He launched a war, the Gulf War I, and that kind of mobilized me into becoming an anti-war activist and getting involved with this kind of this what you would call the left or progressive community. Through those experiences, we started reading these magazines and we started watching CNN and we started freaking out because of the 24-hour video game war that was presented to us. We were like, why doesn't anyone know about this awesome article in The Nation about how we're going to war in Iraq because it's about oil, and looking at ways of understanding what's going on in consensus reality and how can we provide alternative views? How do we amplify other ideas about what's happening in our world? So we came up with the genius idea of starting a zine. The zine was a stapled, oh, there it is. The zine, oops, sorry. I don't know how to use this button, this thing. The zine, Lumpen Times, was started at school. And we just reprinted stuff that we read and had really shitty poetry, bad collages, bad artwork, illustrations, cool crossword puzzles, and we distributed them for free. We got them printed for free at Kinko's because we had friends who worked there. So we make 500 to 1,000 copies. We would sit there and collate and distribute them throughout campus. That experience then got me involved in like kind of left ideas. I started reading all kinds of great authors who were criticizing the media, Noam Chomsky and Edward S. Herman talking about the media monopoly. And for some reason, I believed it would be a great endeavor to go into alternative journalism and work for the left. So I looked for a gig while I was trying to get out of school in these times, which is still here today, known as a Democratic Socialist publication, run by Jimmy Weinstein. And I had interviewed there thinking that, like, oh my God, I'm here, I'm at the center of left knowledge, and maybe I could intern here and get a gig. So I took the gig, and immediately I figured out that the left was super boring, super lame. And I was like, this is not the kind of fun, alternative, weirdo, tear down the pig system culture I want to be a part of. So I started putting up posters, not posters, but little 8.5 by 11 signs with like the little things where you could pull your number off. And it says, wanting to start radical publication in Chicago, call me. And I got some phone calls, and I met a bunch of anarchists and weirdos and students from Columbia and SAC at a coffee shop near Columbia College. And we came and we started having meetings, and I'm like, you know, I'm working at these times, and I'm an intern there, and they have these offices. Maybe we should rent an office out. I think it's like $50 a month. We can get this cool little office. We're like, yeah, we'll have our own office. We started meeting at the office, and we've met for 4 months just to figure out the name of this damn publication. And the best name we came up with? The Paper. We started the paper. We started printing it on newsprint. We understood that we wanted to do something free for the people of Chicago. Alternative analysis of what was happening locally, nationally, weird poetry, conspiracy theories, illustrations. But we used to argue a lot about font size. And it was at that point that I realized that I was a dick and that I really cared about aesthetics, and I suck and everyone else sucks. Look at how shitty these things are. So we're like, you know, I can't spend another meeting talking about whether the fucking title should be in Times or Helvetica and at 32 point or 28 point. I'm sick of this. I was losing my mind. My colleague Chris Molnar, who worked on Lumpen Times with me in college, was like, dude, I'm graduating. What do you do? And I'm like, I live in this weird loft by where I intern. You want to move in and start Lumpen Magazine again? He's like, yeah, let's do it. So we did. We decided to start Reboot Lumpen Magazine. I forgot to mention that while in school, we were turned on by the counterculture of the 60s, and we're really turned on by the underground press, which you may not know about, but back in the day, people would print out papers, hippies would sell them on the street for 5 cents or a dime. You would use that money to fund the revolution, but there were hundreds of publications around the country dedicated against the war and trying to tear down the pig system. We modeled our publication after that because we had no other ideas. But Lumpen, you saw the definition. Essentially, we were stoned, and we were looking for names in the dictionary for stuff, and someone flipped the page and put their finger down on Lumpen, and we all started laughing. And we're like, that's us. And that's also coincidentally what Marx called the lumpen proletariat. Lumpen also means rag. It had all these multiple meanings and vibes. We're like, let's just go for it. So we started Lumpen in Wicker Park in Bucktown back in the 90s. And we were a free paper. There was no internet then. People actually walked on the streets and read posters and stuff. I'm pretty sure that I'm only on this slide, and we're 15 minutes in, that this is going to take 3 hours. So I'm just going to move quicker. Lumpen, we did it monthly. We basically went out and asked people for advertising. If they couldn't give us money, they gave us food, records, stuff, books. We met at Myopic Books and Quimby's. Those were the centers of those were like our offices, these public spaces, these third places. And that's where we met a bunch of weirdos and artists and writers. They're like, oh, are you Lumpen? Can I write for you? We'd be like, yeah, what do you want to write about? I want to write about witchcraft and and how you could use it to get free food at the Whole Foods or something. So we'd print stuff like that. And back then we were also engaged in the idea of like artists being gentrifiers in this neighborhood. So we were actually really vocal about these issues, and we actually had a really high circulation at this time, and we would print stuff monthly, and we would cover what was happening in Wicker Park, and artist activists would write about gentrification, how we were changing this neighborhood. A lot of other papers existed too. Back then there were like zine wars. Letter X was a poetry mag that hated us, and they started writing conspiracy theories about how we would walk around and slash people's canvases and lock the doors of gentrifying businesses, and we would smash their windows with bricks. And they started this amazing smear campaign against us because we were lumpins, these assholes, which we never did any of those things, but we would report on it, we would joke about it, we would make fun of the new businesses that came in. But anyways, we did this magazine for a while, and we tried to make it work. Basically, we all worked for free unless you sold ads, and then you got a commission, and you could like make some money. There were 4 or 5 of us who wound up living in the Lumpen House on Armitage Avenue by Rockwell. And we basically did that job and 5 other jobs, and we tried to run a magazine. And by doing that, we were like, oh man, we have to get on the newsstands. We got to make money on the newsstands. So we switched our format to like a glossy cover. Thinking like, yeah, man, we could put out a cool magazine and people will buy it everywhere. Well, we ran into issues with distribution, distributors paying you. But the greatest thing about us is that if we made a lot of money one month selling ads, instead of saving that money for like a rainy day, we would just purchase 10,000 more copies of the next issue of Lumpen and just print more copies, thinking that everyone needed this. We were so naive in believing that people really cared. People needed this information so we could make a society better, so we could actually become a world that we really wanted to live in. And that was one of the biggest mistakes. I mean, really, we really fucked up. Towards the end of the 90s, I diverged into doing, we were working for 5 or 6 years together in this house. Editors screwed around with each other. People were breaking up. People were having sex with each other, getting like bad vibes. People were pissed off that I always wanted to print conspiracies about the Oklahoma City bomber. But we really tried. We got a new office. We tried to make it pro. We tried to get more advertising, but it didn't work out. Somehow I got into this new, this easy listening culture, and I started a new magazine in which my friends were half naked in it, and we talked about 60s design and architecture and this fictional lifestyle of the Playboy. That really basically pushed a lot of people away, and the founding staff kind of split up. But at the same time, the internet came along. This is like 1995, 96. Back in those days, you had Usenet, which was like a news group, and you would use Pine or Elm. And we met this weirdo named Jorn Barger. He was like a wizard-looking old man who was worked as a computer programmer at Northwestern, and he taught us how to use the computers. And we started downloading these conspiracies like the Vampire 2000 conspiracy of black helicopters and the takeover of the state by the surveillance state and George Bush's Knights of the Apocalypse, and all kinds of crazy stuff. That was the first time we actually jacked someone off online. It was like the first virtual real sex thing we did. But Jorn Berger invented the concept of blog. He is legitimately known as the inventor of the blog. He lived underneath the staircase on a cot, and he would eat misery burritos. He basically got kicked out of this research position at Northwestern and lived underneath our stairs for a while. But Jorn taught us about the internet, and once Netscape came out, created by U of I, where are my people? That's right. Or was it Mosaic? Anyways, the first browser came out, and we made a website. We met these guys who had a server. We put the website up. We're like, man, we're like in the future. Well, we had the website for a few years. As our publication was dying, these guys who had the server started developing content management systems and started making all kinds of crazy custom software for the likes of the Tribune. They made the CarMax thing. Who the hell knows? Chase Bank, Global Corps. And one of the founders made a lot of money, and he loved Lumpen. He's like, dude, we should do a project together. And I'm like, sure, man. What are you thinking? And he's like, I don't know, we should put up like music. There's this new thing called streaming video. Like, oh, I love streaming video. You mean the real player? He's like, yeah, like, imagine if we put live concerts up on the internet that people could watch. It'd be incredible. Like, you can go to an underground show and see it live. It's like, yeah, it sounds awesome. Like, dude, I know all these zine people. Let's just put everybody's zine up on the internet. Let's put some like videos, short films, underground films online. Let's make city guides to free culture everywhere. Let's just make a Lumpen on acid on the internet. He's like, yeah. So like, I'm like, well, how are we going to do that? We need a budget. He's like, yeah, we could do it. And he kept promising that we would do it. And he's like, well, dude, you need to know how to work in the internet industry. He's like, okay, well, I'll work for you. So I started working on making awesome platforms and websites like petplanet.com and other interesting verticals like that, where you learn how to just own a segment, man. After a year of that and helping create the marketing for this company, Outlook, Prescription Strength Content Management System Solutions was our tagline. I was like, dude, this sucks. Like, are we going to do this or not? Because if you're not going to do this, I'm going to do it. So whatever. He's like, no, we're going to do it. I'm like, well, let's go. Formed a company, got an office on Division Street, and we came up with the concept of Supersphere, which is up there. It says, avoid monoculture. Basically, Supersphere.com was a place for live concerts, indie film, indie press, radio, and reviews from the underground. We had 8 live radio stations. We had people who would shoot film using a rig called The Head. They would shoot concerts at Empty Bottle, Double Door, wherever. We put the full-length concert up online. By the time we were done, there was like 2,000 concerts you could watch, hundreds of films, thousands of articles. We had an office in Amsterdam. We were shooting stuff there. We had a whole team who would cover the anti-corporate globalization movement. We used this as a way to put our kind of lefty politics out to the kids who were sitting in their rooms watching streaming media on a postage-sized stamped screen. It was pretty cool. Look at that cool design. Wow. This is the only thing I have to remind me of the most brutal age of my life, coming to the turn of the century. Supersphere.com, unpopular culture. Basically, I had to do the business development. I had to create the whole content management strategy. I had to hire all the people to do the content. I had to sell. I had tried to sell stuff. I'd meet billionaires. I meet billionaires in Belgium where they'd be like, Ed, you got to get big or get niche or get out. And I'm like, yes, Johan, please fund us. And he wouldn't. After 2 years of doing this, or even less time, in April 2001, the dot-com crash came, right? And that's what we were also a victim of that. Cars.com wasn't interested in $5 million content management systems anymore. The Tribune discovered WordPress or something, who knows? But Outlook started losing their clients. And basically, my programmers, my partners, screwed me so many times on not releasing products that it really soured me to this whole internet game that all the kids are talking about. And I got out of the business, and I'm like, I'm done with this shit. Screw the internet. Our dot-communism dream is over, all right? Because at that time, artists and weirdos and creatives were pushing the technologies. We were doing shit that no one else could do. Our website competed with the global corporations we had 1 million fucking users a month back in the 60s, man, doing this shitty website. It was incredible. But it broke my heart. While I was away traveling, meeting billionaires and doing cocaine off the floor of like a weird, Amsterdam brown bar, I was engaged in all these cool, alternative, hybrid, weirdo new media festivals. It was an exciting time for artists and activists to get together to use these new technologies to try to take down and tear down the pig system. At that time, people were organizing using the web to do this kind of like massive public gathering against global power, whether it was like a NATO gathering or it was a World Trade thing or it was what was happening in Seattle with the World Trade Organization where that huge protest came. And for the first time ever in my lifetime, because the left usually eats itself and tries to out-left each other, all these groups got together to work against stopping global corporate power. No offense, Edelman. And because of that, we were able to use these technologies and harness them in ways that were really amazing. And then we would go to these festivals and talk about tactical media. And from that experience, I was like, why don't we have any festivals where artists, musicians, technologists, activists, educators, and weirdos could hang out and have seminars and talks and exhibitions and parties? So I was like, let's just do that in Chicago. So I started doing these things called Version Festival and Select Media Festival. So Version, you see there, we started at the MCA. I have no idea why they asked me over there, but they probably thought I was cool, and I was like, yeah, let's do something cool. we got a budget to invite people from all over the world to come to Chicago to talk about these radical ideas about using the internet as a tool for tearing down this pig system that I keep referring to. And it was great, except it was also really hard working with an institution. At about this time, as we started these festivals, I was working as a bartender, probably doing some consulting for Harley Davidson, and I don't even remember. I still had my internet chops. I was still reading Forrester reports. Does anyone read Forrester reports anymore? Or is that old school? Forrester, illegal, like high level information about what's going on today. If you guys don't have a password and login to Forrester reports, you're behind. I'd read that shit religiously and go, oh yeah, man, I know why we failed at Supersphere. We weren't able to leverage our XYZ when we could have done PDQ. So learning that you can create a bunch of media, awesome media in the real world and in the online was great, but how do you pay for it has been a struggle, right? And it continues to be a struggle to this day. These festivals then happen. We would have 500 participants, actual artists, guests, talkers come and converge in Chicago for a week to 2 weeks for every year. And these festivals became these kind of like amazing kind of nomadic kind of meetings where temporary autonomous zones where we could like chill and engage in super radical, awesome ideas, whether it was how to create a mobile bicycle cart that was like a jukebox that could play marching tunes, anti-war hymns, to radical fairies teaching us how to dance, to learning how to do denial of service attacks against websites anywhere in the world. So it was such a fun time. And it was at that time that we started meeting in places in Wicker Park, back in our old hood, and we got this space across the street from the Square One cafe called above Lubinsky Furniture, which some of you guys probably walk by when you're shopping in the big shopping mall, the Crotch in Wicker Park. Buddy was on the second floor next to our friends gallery, and Buddy really changed my existence. Should I go quicker? Is this too many? I have a lot of slides.
No, we're good. No, we got it.
Okay, thanks. I just feel bad because you probably want to go talk or go to the bathroom. Okay, so we got this space in Wicker Park in 2002 called Buddy. We talked about having a space where we could have an exhibition space, people could live there, lumpen times needed an office. We rebooted the magazine. We started another magazine called Select Magazine. Select was about covering this new media stuff I talked about and this kind of like tactical media stuff. And the place was pretty cool, and it was intense. There was anywhere from 5 to 12 people living there or working there at any other time. We would have a rooftop access right by the L where we could screen films on the roof. We'd have visiting artists in for these festivals. Like these are like 20 Dutch guys and gals who would come every year and freak out the city. We would do installations in the space, and of course there'd be these parties. And these parties were really crucial. At this point, we started releasing these publications and have these parties where if you came to the party, you donated $10, you got a magazine or a thing, and you got a PBR. And then we would sell beer somewhere on the side so someone would notice. And that's how we funded the rent. We basically sold beer from 30 packs that we purchased from Costco or wherever to fund our endeavors. Because we were still doing these publications. We were still putting out media. In fact, at this point, I remember telling my partners at Supersphere, like, dude, the web's cool, but we need to put out like DVDs and CDs and magazines and distribute them all over the world. Free circulation publications and music and media, man, will complement our fucking online presence. And they're like, no, man, no. So when we stopped doing Supersphere, I started all these other things. I started a new record label to put out electronic music that we gave out free. We started putting DVDs along with the magazines and show these underground videos and crazy, awesome new short films and uses of animations. Like, is anyone familiar with the G.I. Joe PSAs from Fensler Academy? The reason why you know about them is because they were on that DVD. Someone ripped them and put them online. And Eric Fensler became this giant, huge meme, moved to the Northwest, and is now like directing Super Bowl commercials for like Coca-Cola and shit. This guy is a genius, and everyone on these releases are geniuses. They are all making underground films. Their whole job was to amplify these kick-ass ideas, work with weirdos, try to bring up radical new ideas to change society or create a better place for ourselves. But of course, 9/11 happened at this time, and it really freaked the shit out of the left, and it became a time of massive retreat for people. This slide just shows some of the stuff that we did, and of course, that's when the second Gulf War began. We refer to this age of George Bush II as the Dark Ages. And at this point, Buddy became a place for us to liberate ourselves from consensus reality. The space had over 300 events in 3 years. We would have things on every Wednesday called the Improvisational Lotto. We'd have workshops, we'd have screenings, there'd be parties, there'd be exhibitions, there would be freedom festivals, there would be all kinds of activities to try to help us figure out a way to gain some agency and liberate ourselves from these kind of like weird beginning of like super fascist times that we perceive was happening in America. The surveillance state was kind of heating up at the time. So many crazy things were happening to our contemporary society that Buddy became this kind of interesting oasis and parallel universe to what was happening. And that spot really changed everyone's lives. It changed mine significantly because working there, we basically learned how to like break things, how to like alienate each other, besides being together. And through that space, we were able to produce so many projects like the things that you saw, like the War News, et cetera. This is a shot of the Buddy in Heaven team, or most of them, at one point on the roof before we were splitting. And I think that sign says, "Fucking for peace." And that was like one of the most important things we could do back then. But yeah, I mean, the space was a dream, really. It was like a transformative thing for me. It was like the space, this open, this semi-private space, a place for gathering and meeting and hosting people was like the most revealing thing that ever happened to me. And it really was awesome. But the problem was we were pigs. We were slobs. We broke things. The landlord hated us. We got kicked out. We were unable to renew the lease. And after we weren't unable to renew this lease, we were like, oh man, where are we going to go? And we started looking in the West Side. We all started looking for new spaces, but rent was super expensive. And slowly but surely, this kind of band of adventurers, these freaks, these activists, all had real lives and had to continue doing their jobs and move to different parts of the neighborhood. This kind of team disintegrated. At that time, I was involved in doing some projects myself. Being a publisher, bartender, carpenter, half part-time consultant, et cetera. We would do art projects. And these are some that happened in the future that I was involved in. The Four Squad thing is a project that happened. Who cares about these things, except for this one? The Principality of Podmajersky was a project I did with Logan Bay. Logan Bay is currently our CFO figure here, also one of the founders of Lumpen Radio and stuff. And we basically mapped out every piece of property that the Podmajersky family owned in Pilsen. And we created this narrative that there was old man Podmajersky. He was a beacon of light, a savior to the artists and artisans of Chicago, finding them shelter and home in Pilsen, creating these beautiful loft apartments for artists to live and work in. And then his father came along, and he changed things a bit. He expanded the empire. But soon, Podmajersky Jr. came. The prince came and ruined it all. He evicted the artist, tripled their rent, and ruined the empire. And the Podmajersky saga is a saga about this gentrification that's happening in Pilsen. But Podmajersky is one of the reasons why Halsted Street between Roosevelt and Cermak is devoid of any storefront businesses. That's just an aside. But we had 1 foot in Bridgeport, the community of the future. About this time when we left Buddy, I was working at my mother's bar called Kaplan's, and a New York Times reporter came in and said, what's going on in Bridgeport? And I'm like, Bridgeport, man, it's the community of the future, if the future's the apocalypse. I was like, can I use that? I'm like, go for it, man. And I explained why. Gang activity. We had a legacy of 5 mayors from Chicago coming from this neighborhood. It was certainly a xenophobic, unwelcoming neighborhood for many decades and years. As working there and experiencing myself the kind of hatred for any of the other beige and brown black people in Chicago, yellow people, you would definitely be able to confront that here back in those days. And it was unpleasant. But being a Southsider myself, when someone called me a gook or a chink, I'd call them a wop or a jagoff. So that's how things balance downtown here. We started moving to Bridgeport. I had already been living there because I left Liquor Park. One of the Lumpen magazines, so Lumpen's still going on. Can you believe this shit? This magazine, this stupid print publication is still happening, right? And here we are in this age of like, new media is now taking over. Facebook starting. MySpace was the shit. Who had a MySpace account? Yeah, right? I got a video of me on MySpace still singing the Smiths. If you guys want to check out my Facebook profile, Happy Eddie Marszewski 5001, look that up. Social media started forming then. These kind of new technologies were developing where you could be in Bridgeport now. And like, oh, I could email you there and see what you're doing. But we would still pull up the magazine. We would investigate the neighborhood. And we had a lot of fun because there's a lot of really awesome hand-drawn signage back then. And some shitty stuff too. But what's really important about, if you look at this Lumpen and all those previous ones, right, is that we finally were working with people who were professionals. Oops, what am I doing? Professional designers made this Lumpen and these other projects happen. I was a hack, remember, failed artist? It's because I suck. But other people did a great job designing these publications and communicating radical ideas in ways that I couldn't. And I relied on those, and I look forward to those collaborations and those ways of talking about how do we talk about and look at our neighborhood or things. This is Charlie. He's still around, but Charlie is basically Bridgeport 2005. If that's the look of the neighborhood, that's it. But at the same time, we have these interesting social spaces. You know where people socialize in Bridgeport? The Dunkin' Donuts, an art space, a weird loft across the alley, and the basement of a community center. There were some really unique, weird spaces, including my mom's bar. Kaplan's, it was called. She'd purchased it in the late 80s from another Korean lady. And of course, being a good son that I am, to this day, I think, Mom, I love you. I worked there. And in fact, the place became an office for a lot of us who were doing these projects. I'd work there Mondays and Tuesdays or something. I would babysit old men who wanted to watch Jeopardy and the Sox game. They would tell my mom if I didn't put the game on or if I was on the computer too much. My mom would tell me, why don't you just talk to those guys, Eddie? And I'd be like, Mom, I'm losing my mind being here, but I got some work done. And at Kaplan's, which we'd worked in forever, I met a guy who I believe was a member of the Chinese mafia here in Chinatown. And he said to me, Eddie, I got a building on Morgan. I'm like, which one? And he told me, I'm like, oh, that abandoned building that no one's lived in for 20 years? Yes, that's the one. I'm like, yeah, let's check it out. We still don't have a place to live. So that team from Buddy, who had nowhere to go, wound up going to this space, which was an old department store back in the late 1800s, the Weller department store. And it was also the headquarters and the unofficial boink pad for Latin Kings on the upstairs. It's kind of gross. This building was actually also a hoarder's paradise. Like, this is actually the building when it's clean. We got rid of 10, 40-yard dumpsters of garbage after the guy who was leasing it removed all of his collectible items. Like hundreds of mattresses, dirty mattresses, like a 10 football team shoulder pads, boxes of condoms with happy faces and peace signs on them. Weird shit everywhere. And we said, yeah, we'll take this space. We really need a space. Because the space at Buddy freaked me out and like made me understand the value of having a space. So this shitty space we worked on, and it was the first construction project that drove me crazy. But the great thing about the space is it was our space now. We weren't renting. And these crazy parties that we were having at Buddy could now begin again. The space was also a place for exhibition, a place for gathering, having events. And of course, you guys might recognize some of these Typeforce pictures. But we learned from Buddy that you can't live and work in the same space. So the great thing about this building is that we had apartments upstairs and this gallery in the first floor. You could be a complete, messy, horrible individual and shit on your roommate in your own 2-bedroom apartment, as opposed to leaving your crap and dirty laundry out for everyone to see in the main gallery floor, and you'll never pick up your dishes or clean your dishes. Very serious issues for people living in collective living. But this space also then amplified and became a new place in Bridgeport for this kind of interesting contemporary activity. And we thought it was awesome, like, wow, we're opening up this cool gallery in Bridgeport. We have these windows and people could see all this great art and be introduced to contemporary art and ideas. It's like awesome. And we believed that for many years. And we believed that we were providing a service to the community. And our involvement in the art world was so huge that we actually said, you know what, there isn't an art magazine in Chicago. There's a deficit here in the city of Chicago. So I tried to convince a bunch of different academics and writers and people I knew from SAIC, et cetera, to start an art mag. They said they wouldn't do it. So I'm like, all right, screw you guys. We'll start the art magazine. We launched Proximity Magazine. And through Proximity Magazine, we were still doing Select Magazine. We were still doing Select Media Festival. We're still doing Version Festival. We're still doing Lumpin' Magazine. We started doing all these projects out of this amazing space called the Co-Prosperity Sphere. And it was cool. But doing an art magazine in the city of Chicago, you know, you'd think second or third biggest city in the country would support an art magazine, right? Wrong. At least not our art magazine. Our magazine talked about socially engaged artists, talked about art and activism, talked about kind of this dark matter of the art world beyond this kind of commercial gloss and valorization of just artists and works that were meant to be hung above your couch. In fact, our publication was more about these creating and identifying the networks. This is an organizational chart of the types of socially engaged art practices that were going on in Chicago at around 2008. It shows individual artists, art spaces, archives, publications, one-time events, and organizations in Chicago that kind of led a discussion and explosion of the idea of creating socially engaged art. These individuals, these people helped basically amplify these ideas. Unfortunately, 10 years later got recuperated into what we see today, where this kind of artwork is now a commodity or an object that you could buy. Co-Prosperity Sphere was great. This is basically an outline of all the shit we were doing at the time in Bridgeport. I'm getting hot. Super hot in here. I think I'm talking too much. If I'm melting, we got to end this soon. But this is nuts, guys. We started a nonprofit after, I forgot to mention, we started a nonprofit after the dot-com crash. PMI was meant to be this institution that would house all these kick-ass radical projects. At this time, it was all volunteer run. Not a single person is actually being paid to do anything except for maybe some artists who got stipends to make work or pay for their airfare or their accommodations. But about this time, while we're in Bridgeport, we were doing Version Fest, we were doing Proximity, and then Proximity Magazine split into 3 other publications. I don't know what we were thinking, but I look at this stuff, and we also had 4 other galleries that we run in the city of Chicago. This is fucked up. So yeah, lots of shit happened, right? We don't know how we did it, but we did. We probably did it much like the CreativeMornings team does their stuff, right? We met, people had special, awesome skill sets that they shared, and we did this stuff. And we did it because we wanted something really cool to happen in our city. At this time, too, we started working with super pro designers like Michael Frymuth and Jeremiah Chu. And these guys, you guys know those little shout outs? Anybody? You don't know? Franklin? Or what? Okay, good. Buy those guys a beer, too. But we were really proud of what was happening with the publications. We were really excited about what was happening. But it's super weird. At this time, guys, I'm an old man. I'm married. I don't think I have a real job. I still have 3 or 4 jobs. I get married, I have a kid, and we're like, this is really weird, you know? We better figure out how to make sure our kid can go to a school or we can afford some diapers or whatever. So we started working more towards figuring out how we're going to survive in this world, right? And these are just really cool images of like this project where we rented 12 spaces in Bridgeport and tried to reimagine the neighborhood as we wanted to see it by offering services and businesses that we wanted to have as amenities in our community. And it was a really interesting way of discovering how screwed up the neighborhood was in terms of how people who owned property and what they did with it. But one day my mom said to me, Ed, I think I want to sell this bar because I'm getting tired of it. And by this time, I'm working like over a decade at my mom's place, serving old men shots and beer and schnapps. In fact, I probably had schnapps. Anyways, we would serve people Malort, and I'm like, Mom, go ahead and get rid of it. I'm tired of working here, unless you can let me take it over, because you won't even let me drink here at night. And my mom's like, you know what, honey, I don't think you know how to run a business. And I'm like, that's true, I don't. But we still need a place where we can hang out in the neighborhood, because there isn't any. She's like, talk to your brother about it. Just talk to my brother. He's like, yeah, maybe we could do this thing. I'm like, great, let's change this shithole dump into a bar that we can go to and get good craft beer, good cocktails, a wider range of spirits besides Jim Beams and Puckers. And he's like, yeah, let's do it. So we did. So we basically closed the place down. My mom was also supposedly retiring. And because we were like, wow, that's a great way for us to, pass off a family business generationally. Maria can retire and start painting because she actually is a pretty awesome painter. She loves her garden. Like, Mom, you could just do this stuff. And we opened up Maria's. And it was just a bunch of us who worked on our video on Lumpin', Version Fest, and Co-Prosperity Sphere that transformed Maria's or Kaplan's into Maria's. My wife was a sculptor and artist and made these awesome chandelier thingies. Our friend Charlie Cray made some furniture for us. Michael Frymuth came up with the branding and identity for us, and we just all contributed to make this place a pretty cool thing. And then when we opened up, and then by this time my mom's like, no one wants to buy your crap beer. It's too expensive. Who wants crap beer? And I'm like, Mom, there's no good beer on the South Side. Just chill out. So we opened the place up, and we started offering really good beer to people. And, I don't know what the hell happened, but people responded and actually gave a shit and started coming to the bar. We started seeing more people in the neighborhood that we never knew existed in the neighborhood because they were afraid to come in this bar because there's no bar to drink in the neighborhood in which you wouldn't get eye-raped or intimidated out of. So with this experience at the bar, we started meeting nerds, beer nerds down here who were like beer. My brother was homebrewing. My brother-in-law was homebrewing. We bought every single beer you could possibly get in the marketplace for a year and drank everything and decided what our menu would be. I'm serious, it was brutal. And we started making awesome cocktails and stuff, and we started presenting this, and people started coming down to Bridgeport. And coincidentally, this is like 2010 or 11, I think an app was invented that allowed people to use other human beings' cars for rent, Uber or Lyft, right? Something like that. Anyone has technology historian in the room? Well, what happened was back in the day in Bridgeport, you couldn't get a cab out of the neighborhood or to the neighborhood. But now you could just take an Uber or Lyft down the South Side and leave whenever you wanted to. And this convergence of technology and creating a weird safe space for people to come in of any gender, color, nationality, and have a good drink was an amazing thing. It built on those experiences that we had at our galleries, at Buddy, where you needed a third place for people to hang at. But this time, instead of charging people money at the door and charging beer illegally at a tiny table by the closet, we were able to sell beer legally out of a storefront to people. And it was a major revelation in my mind. My whole life, I was avoiding the fact that one day I might have to work at this bar that my mom owns. And I finally embraced it and like, holy shit, I could buy all the beer that exists and have it at my fingertips and on my lips, and I drank it. And we started meeting these breweries that were in town back then. There was Half Acre, there was Revolution, and then smaller breweries started opening up like Pipeworks and Spiteful. And we're like, wow, these guys are opening up these spots, and look what impact they've had in their community. we noticed what impact, Maria's had on the community, right? We're like, these breweries actually do a lot for developing places. So we're like, wouldn't it be cool if we opened a brewery too? So we talked about it a lot. And at that time, I started another magazine. We retired Proximity Magazine because no advertisers or galleries would support it. And throughout most of these projects, if there wasn't a community who wanted to support the project, we would just kill it. Of course, that DVD series, Select, died, the Lumptronic label died. All these things passed on, except for Lumpin', right? Which is weird, but I think that's like my only thing that allows me to exist. I still exist if I could put out a Lumpin' magazine, right? I'm still present in this world. It's a really strange thing. I don't get it. I've got problems. But we started Mash Chun Journal, which was for us. First off, it was another epiphany. It was like, why isn't there any good beer news anywhere available? Or why don't we know about this craft beer revolution? And we're like, started asking around. It's like, screw it. We're going to make a publication talking about this stuff. And it's through the exploration of the industry, through doing this magazine, that we learned how to maybe feel confident that we could start a brewery. So whenever we interviewed a brewer or an owner of a brewery, we'd ask them for advice. And that advice allowed us to think about how we should open up our thing, right? Anyways, while we're working on this magazine and learning about the beer industry, Maria's is getting so fucking busy, you can't even hang out there. It sucks going there. I just stopped going there. It was just packed. It's like, what's the point? So like, Mom, we own this building already. You don't have a mortgage. Why don't we do what every other normal person does and take out a loan and build a property, and we could pay a mortgage on it and have a larger space? She's like, maybe you do know what you're talking about, Eddie. So we opened up this new addition to Maria's. And as some of you may or may not know, our whole family's Korean and Polish. Can you tell? Polish, Korean. So we would do these crazy Korean Polish barbecues in the back of the Maria's, where we'd get these Polish sausages and grill them and get a bun, and we put kimchi on them, and people loved it. And soon other chefs loved it. They would start coming by like, can I do a guest kimchi? We're like, we'd love for you to do a guest kimchi. So Bill Kim would do a guest kimchi. Beverly Kim would come by and do a guest kimchi. And Juan Kim came by. Notice they're all Koreans. Yeah, Juan Kim came by and then made bulgogi fucking pierogies. So he made basically a bulgogi beef pierogi on the grill. We're like, who's this guy, man? So we were having a great time with that. And at one point, I remember talking to Juan and going, dude, we might open up this new edition, and we might open up a kitchen, and I'm thinking about doing this Korean Polish restaurant thing. Would you want to work on it? And he's like, fuck no. I'm like, really, man? You can do this. We can do this. He's like, no fucking way, Edmar. Am I ever going to work with you? Somehow I convinced him. I think I have some dirt on him or something that I was going to reveal publicly. No, we basically started talking about the idea, and Juan worked really hard and started doing all these pop-ups and stuff. And we honed what the concept of Kimski could be, so we opened up Kimski. And of course, working with our friends who are badass designers, we were able to present this vibe of Kimski, right? This kind of Korean Polish mashup joint. You may or may not have been there. Of course, my mother's right there. So these experiences, of understanding the use of space, the idea of like a third place, was mind-blowing. And the thing about Maria's is that I really thought our art space was like a great way to introduce alternative culture to people, and that was a way to break down boundaries, etc. I am completely an idiot again, and completely naive. The bar is the thing that helped transform our neighborhood and bring more people to this neighborhood, and as a space where people hatch so many ideas and projects that it'll be impossible for me to track down all the activity that happened. This bar where you could hang out, have a drink, chill with your friends, bitch, complain, celebrate, is probably one of the most important third spaces that we have, unless you're like on the wagon or you're gluten intolerant or something. But the reality is that's what it was for us. And then breweries itself. We started brewing, home brewing, together. Some of the cats that I talked about earlier at Maria's. We started home brewing, and then one day we're just like, you know what, man? Let's just get this psycho brew system. It was like a weird glorified home brew system. These are the cats. some of the cats you see here today on the screen now who started this brewery in a little tiny storefront on Halstead. We basically got like a 1,200 or 1,800 square foot storefront, transformed the kitchen into a brewery facility, and used the psychobrew system, which you see here. And we basically had the same attitude and ideas that we had about starting a magazine, starting an art space, doing a festival, making a record label. It's like, let's just do it. Let's just figure it out. And if we fail, like, who cares? Like, it's just a weird psychobrew system. We can get rid of it or use it for, like, soup. So something weird happened. We actually made really good beers. We had a little rocky start like all new breweries do, but we started making kick-ass beers. One of them, of course, is Jungle Boogie. Yeah, and we started making beer, and then people actually started paying for them. But the weirdest thing is I remember when we first started, I remember like looking, we knew all the pricing of beer because I had purchased beer for like, 5-10 years. Kegs are $150 or $175, and a case of whatever is $40. A bomber is this. And we just said like, oh, let's just sell our beer at this price. And we started doing that, and very quickly, within 2 weeks, we're like, we're gonna run out of money next week, and we will never be, well, this business is over. So I made a decision to say, you know what, if we need to raise the price to cover actual overhead for what we're doing, because we're super small, we're buying small quantities of stuff at a really high price, we're hand filling, we're hand bottling, half of us are volunteering. I think one person is actually being paid to be this person who runs Mars. Wasn't me. And we're buying equipment that's it's affordable, but probably kind of expensive. You buy a $3,000 fermenter, you better sell $3,000 of beer. So we started pricing our beer to our expenses, about how things cost. And people were kind of freaked out by it, but we're like, as long as we make really good beer, and you want our beer, they're gonna pay for it. And they're gonna pay for it because our shit looks good. All right? Our shit is globally good. Our shit is world class, and it's due to all the awesome motherfuckers like you who are out there making awesome stuff, contributing to what we do. So by presenting what we accept as the norm in our lives, like this graphic design, right? You guys see this. You saw that inside those magazines, right? You saw it in our festival design. You saw it in everything we've been doing for over 15, 20 years. We were so used to good design, we forgot how good it was. So then when other people started buying our beer, they're like, oh my God, we love your graphic design. We're like, yeah, of course you love the graphic design. What are you talking about? And then people would start commenting about this. It was like, wow, this is a real brand. This is like a real thing. This is like a real experience. This isn't just like, hey, buddy, hey, Harrison, will you make a drawing for our label and let's do this, man? And you'd be like, yeah. People actually responded to the fact that we cared so much about this handcrafted beer and the presentation in those labels that it really was like a major epiphany. Here I am, an even older man, still not knowing what the hell he's doing, stumbling into something that's beautiful like this craft beer universe, and understanding that if we provide a really high quality product, a good experience, a good presentation, people will give a shit. And then the really weird thing about all this is, of course, our shit looks good, right? There's a little hiccup in this story. Because remember we were selling beer, like at the parties to pay for everything, right? We still have this nonprofit. We're still doing art shows. We're still freaking out. We're still just scrambling for money. I get a letter in the mail a couple years ago because an intern had filled out a form to apply for a low-power FM radio station here in Chicago. And a friend of mine was like, Ed, you got to apply. They're giving nonprofit. You can apply to get a radio station in Chicago. I'm like, we're never going to get this. We never get any funding. No one cares about anything we do. It's too outside. It's too weird. He's like, no, you got to apply. Seriously, do it. So an intern filled out the form. She left us after 6 months. 6 months later, she emails me and says, hey, I got an email from the FCC. They want to know if you want to do you want to do this radio station 24/7. I'm like, yeah. Will you sign this letter? I'm like, sure. Sent the PDF back. The next day, we get a letter from the FCC saying, here's your construction permit to build your license is at 105.5 FM. You have 1 year to build a radio station. And I'm like, holy shit. So, it's December 2015. I don't even know what year we're in anymore. And we came up with the concept of lumpen radio. I basically came up with I said to myself, there's no way this is going to happen unless one individual who lives in Bangkok, Thailand, moves back to the country and does this. So I asked Logan Bay, who's not here, asshole. He's probably playing D&D right now in the office. I begged him to come here, and he's like, Edmar, did you start paying anyone yet? And I'm like, no, but we will pay you, man. What do you want? And he told me, like, whatever you want, Logan, let's just do this. We can't pass up having a radio station. We have to do this radio station. And he's like, all right, cool. He came out. We started thinking about how to do the radio station. We check out that cool thing. See this little explosive? That's our signal. It allows us to reach over 2.2 million people if you actually turn on your radio. And we were really excited by that. And we're like, wow, we're in the tradition of our favorite countercultural radio stations like WFMU. Let's make it a community radio station. Let's just have the best DJs. We'll have awesome talk shows. We could fucking do this. And he's like, we could do this. We had a fundraiser. We started a web-based station by April of 2016, 4 months later. Logan had moved here within 2 months. We started the concept of the radio station. We put a call out for programming, and we started an online radio station. Because I was like, dude, we did this shit in 2000. We ran 8 fucking radio stations. This is not going to be a problem. Come on, buddy. And he's like, you're right, we could do this. But it was really hard. We formed this kind of makeshift studio station. But then what we did, because we had Mars Brewing, is we made a beer. And the beer was called Lumpin' Boogie. And it was a beer made to fund the radio station. And we made a 12-pack of beer, and we asked artist friends to create posters and prints. We made a CD compilation for the boombox-shaped 12-pack of 80s covers, original music made for this particular beer release. We released the 25th anniversary edition of Lumpin' Magazine and sold it for about $100. And people bought them. People responded to the need for us to fund this radio station. And we raised enough money to secure our tower, secure a lease. We raised and of course we had a fundraiser, we raised like $50,000 or $60,000. And we were able to build this radio station, which is in our gallery right now. And it's incredible. Beer, which was the currency for us to fund our projects back in the 90s, is continually being used today to fund the nonprofit. 20 years ago, had I known that if I just managed to start a brewery to fund a nonprofit, I probably would have a better time existing in this life, and I'd have better shoes. You know? Something. But anyways, at this time while we're building this radio station, we were looking for a new place, the place that you're in right now. This place was another disaster. But we learned so much from the previous disasters and building and projects. We were able to become more patient. It took like 2 years from the day that we purchased this building to opening up this tap room to finish the project. In the meantime, we're sitting there in that little Halstead place, making 3 barrels, 4 barrels of beer at a time, hand bottling it, losing our minds, putting guns to our heads. Completely losing our shit. And we got to this place and we started the process of working with our friends again. The cats from Franklin, Michael Frymuth, my wife Rachel, who's always been integral to the design and elements and vibes and the look and feel of everything we do. And we were able to transform this space, which was also an abandoned warehouse with an awesome story. It had not brand new power, but tons of power installed in it. When I started, here's the story of actually finding the place. I'm just driving through the neighborhood because we would do these festivals across the street for like 5 or 6 years. I see a for lease sign in the building. I stop, I'm calling the number. A car pulls up. This guy's like, Edmar, is that you? And I'm like, Tim? He's like, yeah. Like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm trying to call this number. And he's like, no, dude. You can't call that number because I'm the new real estate agent for this building. I'm like, no way. I'm like, you got the keys? He's like, yeah. I'm like, we walked inside. It was another building full with junk on this floor, another frickin' hoarder. He had 12,000 square feet of space of junk. The basement, this dirty basement, was a site for raves. I believe there's No, I don't see it. There's an awesome Ray flyer that we caught. And the third floor was subdivided into like a little maze-like rooms with cement poured all over the floors with little drains. And if you looked up at the ceiling, you would see hundreds of outlets to plug in grow lights. And the third floor was a marijuana growing facility. And I'm like, I'm gonna take this place. I'll make a bid tomorrow. And we got the place, and we said, fuck it, but because of the businesses that we started at Halstead, we were able to show that we could have a product that people liked, that there was an opportunity for us with our sales. We were able to borrow a lot of money. We borrowed shit tons of money. I hope you guys buy some swag tonight. We also had to face the challenges of the marketplace, right? We had to switch from our bomber bottles to cans, but I think we did a good job of destroying everyone else. Right on? You agree? I feel like aggressive about this competition with like brewery and stuff. Really, like, anyone play Risk? Like, I really feel like we started in Australia, right? We moved over to Africa, took over Brazil, got to North America, moved up through Asia, and took Europe. And we're at the point now where we basically are going to kick everyone's ass. But the cool thing, of course, about having this brewery here in the facility is that we're able now to integrate fully our work with artists and weirdos and activists. My whole life, I've always wanted this beer bottle in which you could put a towel in and use it to throw at a tank. And we designed a beer with an instruction of how to take the beer out and put it in. Dreams fulfilled, liquid dreams fulfilled. This was our May 68 beer. We did a whole series of events in the city of Chicago last year. In fact, there's an issue of Lumpin' on the tables over there. We did all these series commemorating 50 years of 1968, and the activities and the ideas and the things and events that happened. And May 68 refers to the revolution in Paris at that time, in which students were joined by workers and people to kind of, not overturn society, but kind of make demands upon society to change it, and they did. Today, of course, you have another kind of weird movement happening. It's kind of nuts. We did another beer. This one's called Pegasus, in homage to the pig that was nominated for president during the 1968 convention by the Yippies. The Yippies were a radical, fun, activist hippie group. And of course, when we release a Lumpin' Comics issue, an artist creates the label or reuse the label on the label from the magazine itself. And then, of course, we work with our friends like Paul Nutt, who we've worked with our whole lives since we've been in Chicago. Ask him to do work for us, and he wants to make a mural. We're like, whatever you want to do, Paul, it's all yours. So Paul's continuing to work on this mural. He's adding on to it. And of course, as you remember, we still have parties. I may be an old, super old ham sandwich, but the kids are still grooving here in the space and still performing and making music. And what I love most about this place is that it's been able for us to utilize it in ways that I never really thought was possible. We have a gallery space. We have DJs. We're running Lumpin' Radio. The music you hear is curated by Lumpin' DJs. We're able to create publications to this day celebrating the work of artists, activists, writers, weirdos, thinkers, etc. We have a publication dedicated to beer to explore the culture of beer and the world around it. And all these things are possible because people were able to purchase that PBR at that party where they were half naked and looking, to get laid. To today, where you're coming for an interesting experience in a chill spot that's designed fucking like tits and has great beer. Our beer is the shit. And if we want you to come here to have a beer, and you might be able to hang out in the ambient chill beer zone or go into the gallery and play Dungeons and Dragons. And I'm really excited about that. And I think through this tale that I've told you, which I can't even believe we're almost done with, I hope you understand that it's really important just to do what you think is needed to happen in society. All these things happen because hey man, we don't have an XYZ here, why don't we do it? And you do it. And even if it doesn't work, you'll be able to do it again and again and again. So Michael Frymouth made this beautiful graphic of me where I'm shitting a little rainbow. And as I part with you on this conversation, I want to ask you all to please go into that gallery space and take all those back issues of Lumpins, Proximities, Mass Trend Journals home with you. If you leave a single copy here, I'll realize that I failed again. And if you think about it, if you care about these endeavors, and if you really care about maybe someone here, like myself, getting a full-time job here, Consider contributing to Lumpen and Lumpen Radio. Here's a great quote. For the price of just 1 cup of coffee, you could support a low-power FM radio station. So please, consider meeting our man, Nick Wiley, our new director of Public Media Institute, and consider supporting the radio station, which will in fact support so many nefarious activities that you don't have to know about. You'll be proud of it. You'll be so delighted where your money goes. All right? And we have like a higher we could do so much more with little bits of money than Edelman or any organization on earth. All right? Edelman, you might want to consider an employee matching program for our nonprofit as well. And all of you other corporations out there watching right now, please just donate as much as you can. But anyways, thanks you guys.